In the vast, shifting sands of the Sahel, a ghost was haunting the world. Not a phantom of ancient folklore, but a man whose name whispered terror across 3 different continents. How did a local insurgent rise to become the global figurehead of the world's most dangerous caliphate? Today, we reveal the untold story of the night the shadows finally caught up with him. This is the secret chronicle of a high-stakes manhunt that united 2 distant nations in a singular, deadly purpose. The Lake Chad Basin has long been a labyrinth of dense marshes and hidden trails, a perfect sanctuary for those who wish to disappear completely. By 2022, the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP, had transformed this difficult terrain into a fortress of radicalism and fear. At its helm was a leader so elusive that many experts doubted his very existence. He wasn't just a local warlord, he was a strategic mastermind orchestrating a global campaign of unprecedented violence and terror. As his influence grew, so did the international bounty on his head. He had successfully unified fractured militant groups under a single black banner, posing a direct threat to the sovereignty of the Nigerian state. This leader managed to bypass traditional communication channels, using a network of couriers and encrypted messages to stay one step ahead of the most advanced intelligence agencies. The world was watching, but the target remained a flickering shadow in the tall grass of the Borno wilderness. The terror was not just a headline for the people living in northeast Nigeria, it was a daily reality. Families in remote villages lived under the constant threat of raids, forced recruitment, and the imposition of a brutal ideology. The insurgents moved like ghosts through the scrubland, appearing and vanishing before the local authorities could react. This pervasive atmosphere of fear made gathering intelligence nearly impossible, as the cost of cooperation with the government was often a swift and public execution. However, the tides began to turn when the Nigerian military leadership realized that traditional warfare was insufficient against such a nimble enemy. They needed a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Deep within the command centers of Abuja, a new strategy was being forged. It involved the integration of local knowledge with global technological superiority. The objective was clear: decapitate the leadership of the insurgency to break the morale of the rank-and-file fighters who had terrorized the region for so long. This was the point where the United States entered the equation. Recognizing the global implications of a resurgent Islamic State in Africa, Washington authorized a rare level of cooperation. This wasn't just about providing equipment, it was about sharing real-time satellite feeds and advanced signals intelligence. For months, the 2 nations worked in total secrecy, their specialists sitting side by side, monitoring the vast expanse of the Sambisa forest and the islands of Lake Chad for any sign of movement. The hunt was agonizingly slow. Every lead was meticulously followed, every radio intercept analyzed by linguists and counterterrorism experts. The coalition had to distinguish between local smugglers, innocent herdsmen, and the high-value target they were seeking. One wrong move could alert the leader, causing him to vanish back into the impenetrable bush. They were looking for a needle in a haystack, but this needle was armed and capable of striking back with devastating force against civilian targets. A breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source, a series of intercepted courier movements that suggested a high-level meeting was scheduled in a remote camp. This camp was located deep within a region heavily controlled by ISWAP, making a ground assault nearly impossible without significant casualties. The decision was made to utilize air power, but it had to be precise. The window of opportunity was narrow, and the weather over the Lake Chad Basin was notoriously unpredictable and volatile. As the sun dipped below the horizon on the night of the operation, the atmosphere at the Tactical Command Center was thick with tension. Nigerian Special Forces stood ready at a nearby airbase, while unmanned aerial vehicles circled miles above the target, invisible to the naked eye. These drones provided the final confirmation: the target was on the move. The coordination between the American intelligence controllers and the Nigerian strike pilots was a masterpiece of modern military synchronization and trust. The operation was not without its risks. The camp was surrounded by civilians who were often used as human shields by the insurgents. The rules of engagement were strict: any collateral damage would undermine the legitimacy of the entire mission. The pilots had to wait for the target to be isolated. Minutes felt like hours as they orbited the strike zone. Then, a single vehicle broke away from the main group, heading toward a secluded structure on the edge of the marshes. The command was given. In a flash of fire and thunder, the strike was executed. The precision munitions found their mark with terrifying accuracy, obliterating the target's position in a matter of seconds. There was no time for the insurgents to react or mount a defense. Back in the command center, silence fell as they waited for the post-strike assessment. The thermal cameras showed a scene of total destruction, but they still needed confirmation that the leader himself had been neutralized. As dawn broke over the Nigerian landscape, the reality of the strike began to emerge. Local informants and ground reconnaissance units moved in to secure the site. The news traveled quickly through the ranks of the insurgency, causing immediate chaos and confusion. The man who had once seemed invincible was gone, and his followers were left without a clear successor. The joint operation had achieved what years of conventional fighting could not. It had struck at the very heart of the ISWAP machine. The official announcement from the Nigerian military was cautious but triumphant. They highlighted the successful collaboration with international partners, signaling a new era of security cooperation. For the people of Borno and the surrounding states, there was a tentative sense of relief. While the war was far from over, the removal of such a high-profile leader was a significant blow to the group's ability to plan large-scale operations and maintain its ideological grip on the region's vulnerable youth. In Washington, the strike was hailed as a major victory in the global fight against the Islamic State. It demonstrated that even in the most remote corners of the globe, there was nowhere to hide from a determined coalition. However, critics warned that killing a leader does not necessarily kill an ideology. History is filled with examples of radical movements that have regenerated after losing their figureheads. The question remained, would this strike lead to a lasting peace or simply a temporary lull in violence? The details of the target's final moments remain classified, but the impact of his death was immediate. Internal power struggles broke out within ISWAP as lieutenants vied for control. This infighting further weakened the organization, allowing the Nigerian military to reclaim territories that had been under insurgent control for years. Villages that were once ghost towns began to see the return of their inhabitants, as the shadow of the caliphate began to recede, if only slightly, from the scorched earth. Military analysts point out that this operation was a turning point for the Nigerian Air Force. It showcased their ability to conduct complex, intelligence-driven missions in collaboration with world-class powers. The lessons learned in the Lake Chad Basin are now being applied to other conflict zones across the continent. This wasn't just a win for Nigeria, it was a blueprint for how African nations can leverage international support to solve regional security challenges without sacrificing their own national sovereignty. However, the underlying causes of the insurgency remain. Poverty, lack of education, and environmental degradation in the Sahel continue to provide fertile ground for radicalization. The joint strike solved a tactical problem, but the strategic challenge of regional stability requires more than just drones and missiles. It requires a sustained commitment to development and governance. The death of a global terrorist leader is a milestone, but the road to a truly secure West Africa is long and filled with obstacles. The collaboration between the US and Nigeria also sent a clear message to other militant groups in the region. The reach of the coalition is long, and their patience is even longer. By targeting the leadership, they have forced these groups to spend more energy on survival than on expansion. This shift in dynamics has given the local communities a much-needed breathing room, allowing for the slow process of rebuilding shattered lives and restoring the social fabric of the Northeast. What does this mean for the future of the Islamic State globally? The loss of their West African commander is a blow to their narrative of inevitable expansion. It proves that the provinces of the caliphate are vulnerable and that their leaders are not untouchable. As the group struggles to maintain relevance in the Middle East, their failures in Africa further erode their brand of terror. The world is safer when these networks are disrupted and their masterminds are held accountable for their actions. The true crime here isn't just the acts of terror committed by one man, but the systematic destruction of a region's potential by a radical ideology. The joint strike was an act of justice for the thousands of victims who lost their lives or their livelihoods to ISWAP's campaign. Each drone strike and each tactical raid is a response to a litany of crimes against humanity that have gone unpunished for far too long in the hidden corners of the world. As we look back at the operation, the technical brilliance of the strike is undeniable. But we must also remember the human intelligence that made it possible. Courageous Nigerians risked their lives to provide the ground-level details that satellites could not see. These unsung heroes, often working in the heart of enemy territory, are the real reason the mission succeeded. Their bravery is a testament to the resilience of the Nigerian spirit and their refusal to be cowed by extremist violence. The story of the strike against the ISWAP leader is a reminder that the world is more connected than we often realize. A threat in a remote marshland in Nigeria can have consequences in London, Paris, or New York. This global interconnectedness is why international cooperation is not just a choice, but a necessity in the modern age. The success of this joint mission provides a glimmer of hope that through shared intelligence and shared purpose, even the most formidable threats can be overcome. But as the dust settles, we must remain vigilant. The ideology that fueled the rise of the Islamic State remains a potent force, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The victory in Borno was a battle won, but the war for the hearts and minds of the people continues. Security is more than the absence of war, it is the presence of opportunity, justice, and peace. Only then can we truly say that the shadows have been banished from the Sahel for good. In the end, the story of the fall of the global Islamic State leader is a story of what happens when the world refuses to look away. It is a story of partnership, precision, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As Nigeria moves forward, the memory of this operation will serve as both a warning to those who seek to sow chaos and a promise to those who seek peace. The shadow may have been long, but the light of day has finally returned.